and welcome back for another Yippee for Yana video. In this episode, I will show you how to use Kraft cardstock to your advantage when coloring with Copic markers and creating a fall card in muted colors. When I was finishing this card, my husband stopped by my desk and expressed his astonishment regarding the fact that Copic markers color so well on Kraft cardstock. He said, and I quote, "I thought they only worked on white." And I think a lot of people have this perception or misconception. We believe that Copics are a good coloring medium to use on white paper only. I am the kind of person who likes to break the rules and even rebel, if you will. So when it comes to this coloring medium, I'm all about trying something else besides the ordinary. I've started working on my card by stamping a beautiful floral cluster from the Thankful Flowers stamp set from the October 2019 card kit from Simon Says Stamp in intense black ink onto Kraft paper that was included in my kit. I cut the paper down to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I will later trim it down some more. I wanted to have more than just one cluster on the card, so I used other single floral and leaf images from my stamp set to add additional imagery to this panel. I did do a little bit of simple masking. I stamped the 2 single flowers onto masking paper. I cut them out, making partial masks. I didn't even cut the whole thing out as there was no need to do that. I only needed a partial mask. And then with the masks in place, I added single stamped leaves next to the flowers, creating 2 mini clusters in the bottom right and top right corners of the panel, forming a floral cluster triangle of sorts. The middle bottom area of the panel is where I planned to have the sentiment, so I kept it relatively free from any imagery. With the stamping done, I moved to the coloring part. I'm not a pro when it comes to Copic markers. I don't have a whole collection. In fact, I only have a handful of markers. But over the years, I have collected the colors that work really well together. And whenever I color with Copics, I tend to stick to the same colors over and over again. And you'd be surprised. The only thing that changes in my coloring is the color of paper that I color on. Truth be told, I find myself rarely coloring on white these days. Anyhow, the colors I picked for my coloring are G99, G94, and YG03 to color the leaves. This green color combo looks great on Kraft and becomes more muted and a lot more suitable for fall coloring, all thanks to that background paper color. It does look more vibrant on white, but the Kraft here mutes the vibrancy of the color and makes it ideal for fall. To color the flowers, I used a set of red and orange markers. My red go-to color combination is R89, R39, R27, R24, and R22. I did go very dark, deep red here to have a nice, bold shadow to my flower petals. Again, as with the green markers, due to the background color of the paper that I was using, the reds ended up a lot more muted. You can especially see that when I color with the R22 marker. It almost doesn't add any color, almost no red at all, but only makes the Kraft a bit more vibrant. You can also compare the vibrancy of the red color when you look at my nail polish. The nail polish is true red, while the red flower looks a lot more muted. As for the orange colors, I'm not really a fan of orange color per se, but I do enjoy seeing it in nature. I love the orange leaves and the orange flowers that you'd see during fall. But I just somehow struggle to recreate that same gorgeous orange color on paper. Here, on this Kraft background, it was actually much easier to have pretty orange flowers. I used YR18, YR04, YR15, and Y15 to color the flowers orange. You can tell I'm doing very simple coloring here. I'm going from dark to medium to light, and sometimes going back to the darkest color to intensify the shadows if I feel like it. I also used orange markers to color the flower centers on the red flowers. And for the orange flowers, I used a C7 and a C9 markers to have almost black centers. With the coloring done, I used my heat tool to dry the ink on this panel. I knew I would be heat embossing over this, and I didn't want to run the risk of embossing powder sticking to areas where it wasn't supposed to, where it wasn't wanted. So I dried the panel with a heat tool. Next, to test it, I treated it with anti-static powder and then poured embossing powder over it to see if any embossing powder would remain on the panel. None did, so I proceeded to heat embossing the actual sentiment. I repeated adding anti-static powder to the panel. Next, I used Simon's clear embossing ink to stamp the sentiment. The sentiment comes from the same stamp set as do the flowers, the set called Thankful Flowers. There are actually several sentiment options in that set, including several large focal point sentiments and a few smaller messages, as well as those that can be stamped on the inside of the card. I stamped one that reads, "You couldn't be more awesome. I can't thank you enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you." I did not yet stamp anything on the inside of my card as I wasn't really sure what I wanted to say. I'll wait until I'm ready to gift this card to stamp an appropriate message. To spice this background up, I decided to trim the panel down to 4 by 5¼ inches and treat the edges with embossing powder to make them look as if they are dipped in gold paint. I learned this trick a while back from Christina Werner, and I think it adds the most perfect touch to any embossed card. And it's very easy to do as well. All you need to do is gently rub the embossing pad along the edge of the panel and then dip it into embossing powder. You can either pour embossing powder onto the panel or dip the panel into embossing powder like I'm doing here. And of course, heat set it to melt the powder in place. This stamp set also has 2 small dot clusters that can be used to add details to the flowers. I used mine and heat embossed them in same antique gold embossing powder, scattering them around the panel and the flowers. I used one of Simon's pre-made card bases for the card, the A2 side folding card, and I foam mounted my panel onto it using fun foam. The panel warped a bit from all of that heat embossing, and the fun foam actually helped to flatten it. Lastly, I picked a few gold and cream sequins from the SUNKEN Treasure sequin mix to decorate my card. I used my crystal katana tool and Simon's Kraft TACKY glue to adhere them in place. I loved using this glue bottle, by the way. The applicator is very fine and precise, and it allowed me to add just the right amount of glue to adhere even the smallest sequins in place. I hope you'll give this idea a try. If you do make a card inspired by this video, we'd love it if you shared your project online and tagged us on social media. We love seeing what you make. Thanks so much for joining me today. Love you guys. I'll see you next time.